This is your how-to peel and stick wallpaper, brought to you by myself, Gailey Alex, and the Home Depot. And why am I talking about the Home Depot? Well, because if you go on their website, that's where all of my new wallpaper is sold. Okay, speaking of wallpaper, let's start by talking about pattern. If you use a design like my Coral Way, where there's a heavy pattern that you're gonna need to line up the seams in order to hide the seam, it's a little bit extra work, but totally worth it. And if you're a first timer and you're nervous about lining up the seams, you could use something like this, my Rio Vista collection, where there's no real defined pattern, so however you hang it, the seam will be hidden. I dare you to tell me that you see a seam on this wall. All right, the other great thing about peel and stick is that you can also just as easily peel it off. It literally takes seconds and it won't damage your paint or your drywall, so it's great for renters or people like me that just like to change up their house a lot. And friendly reminder, if you're installing wallpaper, the wall needs to be smooth, flat, and dry. That means if you have the orange peel texture, you'll need to do some compound on there, sand it, and paint it before you can put wallpaper on it. And if you have a bathroom where the mirrors fog up frequently, that means there's too much moisture in that air. I would not recommend wallpaper for it. Next, let's run or cartwheel our way to Home Depot and get our tools. First, you'll want a wallpaper smoother and a utility knife. Highly recommend getting a new blade if you have an old knife because a sharp cut is everything. You'll also want a tape knife, the longer the better, so I like the 12 or the 14 inch. And then you'll need cardboard. So many people forget that. You'll want a right angle and a level. And these are all of your tools if you want to take a photo. Oh, and don't forget pencil and measuring tape. All right, let's do this. Okay, first we need to take the measurement of the height of our first wall because we need to know that number to know how long to cut the first piece. Also, fun fact, stepping on the measuring tape is one of the easiest ways to measure ceiling height, so highly recommend. Now we're going to cut our first piece. You need to add 4 to 8 inches beyond what you measured your ceiling height at for every piece. That's really important. It'll come into play later. And this is where we first use our level. Not so much for leveling, but more for the straight edge. And then we're gonna use our right angle and we're gonna hook it on the side of the wallpaper to make sure that we get that level perfectly straight before we make our cut. This is also so important. Use the cardboard underneath because it protects your floor from getting cut and it also makes for a really clean cut on the wallpaper. This next part only applies if you have a pattern where you need to line up the pattern to make it seamless. So in this case, you can see I'm extending one of the pieces to figure out exactly where it lines up so that I hide the seam. And then I'm gonna cut it all out, the whole room, before I install anything to make sure that all my pieces line up. This is why I recommend getting 2 extra rolls anytime you do a heavy pattern because there's a lot more waste. Next, we're gonna get ready to install our first piece. I always like to start in the corner, except with grass cloth. I start in the middle so that the seams are even, because that's the only wallpaper where you see seams. But anyways, you're gonna get the measurement of the width of your wallpaper, and then you're going to make tick marks up and down the wall of that exact measurement off of the corner. This way, we make sure that this level helps us get a perfectly straight first piece. And if that bubble's on the sides, it's not good. You want that bubble right in the middle there. That means it's straight. So then you go to the tick marks you made and you make a straight line, and you're gonna use that later when you go to line up your wallpaper. Now it's time to get this beauty on the wall. We're gonna start by unpeeling about 14 to 16 inches off of the top of the back. You wanna do a decent amount because it will really help you as you're adjusting and lining it up with the line, trust me. And here's the exciting part, we're getting our first piece on the wall. 2 really important things. 1, make sure that the edge of your wallpaper is lined up perfectly with the straight line that you made with the level. That ensures that that piece is perfectly straight and all the next pieces will also be straight. Number 2, you want to make sure you leave about 2 to 4 inches of extra wallpaper on the top. This is why we made the length of every piece we cut about 4 to 8 inches longer than the length of the wall. This comes into play later when we cut it all evenly. Next, you're gonna get your wallpaper smoother and you're gonna get all of the bubbles. You just push them to the sides, push them down, just any way you can get them out, and make sure to go really tight into the corners and up against the ceiling. Next, once that's all smooth, you're ready for the next step. You just go underneath, grab the lining, and you slowly pull it down with both hands. And you just want to pull it down another, I would say 2 feet, and just make sure you're pulling evenly on both sides so that everything stays smooth and even. And then you just rinse and repeat and keep peeling and sticking until you get down to the bottom. Now I want to show you how a corner works. It's really not as scary as it sounds. The hardest part is really if you have a pattern because you need to line it up with the previous pattern, but the good news is you already put it out on the floor and cut it to length so that the patterns align, so you shouldn't have an issue there. And here's a close-up of the corner I just did. You cannot even tell that these are two separate pieces meeting in the corner thanks to the pattern lining up. And if you don't have a pattern, even easier. Now it's time to cut the excess off the top. This is where you use your tape knife and your utility blade, and you're just gonna slowly run the knife and the blade all the way across, never lifting it, and that's how you get a really seamless cut. I'll show you again in a second. Now, when it comes to outlets and light switches, this is something that scares people, and it really doesn't have to. It is so easy. So what you're gonna do is, as you get to the spot, you just tape up your wallpaper for a moment. You remove whatever cover you have on your outlet, and I would get in the habit of always putting my electrical screws on a piece of tape and then taping that to the outlet cover. You can thank me later when you never ever lose them. Okay, next you're gonna keep going with the wallpaper. You're going to stick it to the wall, and then you're gonna use your smoother to really identify exactly where the outlet is. Then you're gonna use your pencil to mark it up, because we need to know exactly where we're gonna cut this hole out. I like to start with the utility blade and I just make a little X, but then I use my scissors to actually cut it. Really important, make sure you stay far away from the outlet. You don't want anything metal sticking into the outlet, inside of the wall, anything like that. So just be smart, keep it away from the wall. And then you just finish by using your smoother and getting it really tight to the baseboard and all around the outlet. If you need to reveal the screw holes to put your cover back on, you can just use your scissors to open up those holes and get your plate back on. And how convenient is that? The screws are right there. Never lost. All right, so I'm putting the outlet back on here. You can see how clean it all looks. I'm so happy with how it turned out. But now we got to address that baseboard because that needs to get cut. And before we do that, we're gonna make sure we get the wallpaper really tight to the baseboard. And would you believe me if I told you there's a seam right here? You can't even see it. It's amazing what happens when you line up pattern. So we're gonna take our 12-inch tape knife, otherwise known as my long blade, and then I'm gonna take my utility knife and I'm gonna slowly glide them all the way across without ever lifting either hand. If there's anything you remember from this video, remember this. You do not lift either hand. You hold it really flat and you just keep gliding them one after the other so that you never lose contact. That is how you get the perfect, most seamless cut. Think of it like Dory. Instead of just keep swimming, it's just keep gliding, just keep gliding. Also, there's proof right there that there was a seam there. I wasn't lying. It looks great, right? Okay, so this is what the powder bathroom I just did ended up looking like with this amazing coral weight pattern. And I also wanted to remind you that there's so many other patterns you can do in my collection. And also don't forget, there's other opportunities too. If you have textured walls where maybe this won't work, but you really want to use wallpaper, you could use peel and stick, like one of my faux linen patterns inside of a cabinet or maybe at the bottom of a drawer. And all you have to do is just cut it to size, peel it and stick it, and voila. There's so many things you can do with peel and stick wallpaper to instantly elevate your space, and what's great is that you can do it yourself. So if you want to be a doer who gets more done and you loved any of the patterns you saw here today, just go to homedepot.com and search Gailey Alex Wallpaper. All my patterns and colors are there, ready to make your space beautiful.